What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Remember that this is the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2018 award winner for innovation given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And as always, love to have friends come on the Dr. Vibe show. And this young lady reached out to me through a gentleman from the Good Men. Well, he does stuff for the Good Men Project, also stuff on his own, Andrew Smiler. And this lady said, Andrew told me that I should go on your show. So I said, okay, if Andrew's saying someone should come on, they should come on. So this is who we have tonight. We have Dr. Joan Cook. She's a clinical psychologist and associate professor in the Yale School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry. She has over 100 peer-reviewed publications and has served as the principal investigator on 7 federally funded grants. That's in the United States, by the way. Dr. Cook has worked clinically with a range of trauma survivors, including combat veterans and former prisoners of war, men and women who have been physically and sexually assaulted in childhood and adulthood, and survivors of the 2001 terrorist attack on the former World Trade Center. She was a member of the American Psychological Association APA Guideline Development Panel for the treatment of PTSD and the 2016 president of the APA's Division of Trauma Psychology. Since 2015, she's been writing for a wider audience and has published over 70 op-eds on mental health in places like CNN, Time Ideas, The Washington Post, and The Hill. She's going to be sharing with us another one of her op-eds talking about just recently in the New York Times. And if you go to the post promoting this conversation, you can click on it and read it. The title of the op-ed is When Men Are Sexually Abused in the Military. So we'd like to say welcome for the first time, but not the last time, hopefully, Dr. Joan Cook. How are you this evening?
I am well. How are you? Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much.
You know, and I'm glad you asked me how I was, because I always say another thing. I'm blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. So thank you for asking that, because I forgot to mention that. So I am that. Thank you for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule to share with us this evening. Looking forward to getting a lot of knowledge, in this being World Mental Health Day.
Yes.
This is a very applicable conversation today in regards to the challenges that some military veterans and probably current people in the military face on a daily basis. So before we get started on the topic, can you give a little background about yourself, going back a little bit? What was the younger before Dr. Joan Cook, what was Joan Cook all about, especially in her younger days?
Oh, let's see. I think I always knew that I wanted to do psychology. It just came really natural to me. I loved it. I remember taking a class in high school and being so engrossed and so excited that the the girl behind me tied my hair in knots and I didn't even feel it. I was just mesmerized. And I didn't always want to be specialized in trauma. I started out working with older adults. My master's thesis was on Alzheimer's disease caregivers and the stress related to that. And it was in graduate school while I was working clinically with older adults that I had several older adult clients who were talking about early childhood abuse experiences, particularly sexual abuse. And at the time, 20 some years ago, I was like, wow, this is interesting. Someone's in their late 70s and 80s, and this is still, a big part of their life and hasn't been metabolized and digested. And I thought, wow, these people have married and had, careers and children, and yet this is still haunting them. Now, I would say, of course, that's a no-brainer. But 20 some years ago, when I was so new to the field, I was in shock and engaged and excited and thought, wow, this is something I could do. So from there, I sort of married those interests, and I worked a lot with older adult trauma survivors. And over the past few years, I've begun researching, although clinically I've worked with men, both military men and civilian men who've experienced sexual abuse and assault across the lifespan. I've maybe about 5 or 6 years ago really started researching this population, whereas that was not my primary area of investigation before. And it's a neglected population, which is why I wanted to talk to you about them.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Now, how did the transition from looking at elderly to military, how did that happen?
So in graduate school, I worked in a clinic with adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And from there, I went on my internship and my postdoc to the VA in Palo Alto in Northern California, and was there for 3 years. And so it wasn't necessarily that I had an interest in working with veterans at the time, although now I am mesmerized. I feel like every day should be National Appreciation for Veteran Day. But I went there to work with some geriatric researchers that were highly regarded at Stanford, and I just also got the bug and the love for the veterans. So that's was 1998 when I first started working with veterans, and now I volunteer at the VA that's affiliated with Yale in West Haven, Connecticut.
Wow, that's fantastic. When you first started this journey of your career, did you ever say at the beginning, what did I get myself into, or this is so overwhelming? Or was it something that you said, you know, this is my core, this is where I'm supposed to be?
Yeah, more the latter. So initially, as I said, I was a geriatric researcher. And when I was assigned to be in this adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse clinic, when I was in my maybe mid 20s, and I thought, I don't think I want to do this. And I only signed up for that practicum because I wanted to work with that supervisor. And it was actually my last choice. I had 4 other older adult, clinical experiences that I wanted to do first. And I got chosen to do that clinic. And when I first got assigned, I went to the supervisor. His name's Steve Gold. He's an amazing trauma psychologist. He's still very much a mentor and an influence and an inspiration. And I went to him and I said, I can't do this. I study geriatrics. I do research. I'm not a clinician. I don't think I could handle this. And I think I would cry all the time. And he said, I'm sorry, I don't have enough students and you need to do this rotation. And it was a year-long rotation. And he said, go read the patient charts and you'll feel much better. And what happened is I read the patient charts and I was quite scared. They had, 4 or 5 major mental health diagnoses, some depression and substance abuse and dissociation. Some had engaged in self-injurious behavior or self-harm, which people do when they're deeply, deeply pained. They cut on themselves. And so I went back to him. I said, now I know I can't do this. And he said, I'm sorry. And I saw my first client, my first survivor, and that was it. I never looked back. I thought, there before the grace of God go I. No doubt, had I had those experiences, I would be sitting right there. And in addition to their distress, they had such incredible strength and resilience. And I have had the great pleasure of working with the most amazing patients for over the past 20 years. Very blessed.
Fantastic.
Very, very
fantastic. Good, great to hear. Just before we go any further, I want to shout out some people who are watching this live. I'd like to say shout out to Lori. Thank you for watching on the Get Vocal platform. Also, we have Serena Wills, who retweeted it out, who's watching via Periscope. Got some other people chiming in. And folks, if you have any questions or comments, depending what platform you're on, if you're on Get Vocal, you can type them in or you can actually come on screen. We also have some people on YouTube. If you're on any other platforms watching this live, just type in your questions and comments. We'd appreciate them. When you approached me about coming on doing this conversation, I was almost like a triangle. There's sexual abuse, there's military, and there's men.
Mm.
And I said, I don't usually hear of that. Like, I've had very, very few conversations on this platform. I'll get to Dr. Tatch in a moment. When these just sexual abuse of men, just in general, it's not really chatted about. So I'm very happy to have this conversation with you, because it's something that very, 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 very few people chat about. Did you realize that you were going on a journey that could be very remote and lonely, and there were a lot of people looking at this?
No, because I think, although, 20 years ago when I was getting my doctorate, there weren't as many people specializing in trauma psychology. I had this incredible mentor who introduced me to a lot of other clinicians and researchers who had big brains and big hearts and a lot of integrity. So I never felt alone. I always felt like, I remember one time going to one of our professional homes for trauma research. Is called the International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies. And I remember going to a conference of the ISTSS in Miami one year. And one of the speakers at the time was the US Attorney General, Janet Reno. And I remember she said, "You people are doing the work of angels." And I thought, yeah, I work with a lot of angels. And so I haven't felt alone. And not that I've never get stressed. I absolutely get stressed. Ask my husband, ask my kids. But I feel like what I get to do, I'm so privileged to be able to help somebody hold their pain and help them work through it. Yeah.
Wonderful. When you first started this journey, was it easy for you to sit with men in the military and have them converse or share with you?
I think, I've now worked with a number, as you had said, a number of trauma populations. So I think initially when I did any of the work, whether it was on sexual abuse or whether it was 9/11 related trauma or whether it was on combat or captivity, it's never easy. It's painful stuff to talk about. It certainly has impacted me in some ways to be able to hold that pain. But I think that's why I also like diversify my portfolio. I don't only do clinical work. I do some service to the field, like you had said earlier. I do some writing, some op-eds. I also do some research. So I try to sort of balance that out. But yeah. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. So a few things. I also want to welcome Dr. Tachi, who's on the Get Vocal platform. She's saying this is very intriguing. And for those who don't know about Dr. Tachi, she hosts an incredible conversation on Wednesday evenings called Mediascope, Best of Media, Tech, and Pop Culture, 5 o'clock on Instagram Live. That's 5 o'clock Eastern and 6 p.m. Eastern on Periscope and Facebook Live, and also LinkedIn Live. So she's one of those high up people that are on LinkedIn Live. I don't know what I have to do to get there, but I'll have to get the secret sauce from Dr. Tachi. Now, with what are some, there's so many things I want to chat about. Let me ask, what are some things that the general public doesn't know about this subject that they should know?
I think one of the biggest things that I appreciate what Laurie had said about that she's met so many men who've been sexually abused as boys and as adults. So I think, one of the biggest things for the public to know is that it happens in the first place. And I think, we're more conscious now that it happens to women, and especially since sort of the Me Too movement. And I think that's great. But I feel like the men have gotten left behind. The best estimates we have say that 1 in 6 boys are sexually abused in some way by the age of 18, and that likely increases to 1 in 4 across the lifespan. Now, as a trauma psychologist, I don't find that startling. I knew that, but I find it disheartening and painful. And I don't think the public yet knows. And so I think that's one of the things that I've sort of been, I don't know if you'd call it a mission, but I'm definitely passionate about writing for the public to help make more people aware, so that survivors know, so that family members know too, and the general public know, but so that survivors know that they are not alone, and that there was nothing they did to bring about this experience, and the shame that they may feel and the self-loathing, that is not their shame and self, that is the perpetrators. And that healing from sexual trauma is absolutely possible. And so that's what I've been writing some op-eds about recently.
Okay, and you'd mentioned Lori. I'm going to share her comments here. Lori's saying, I am an Alberta ambassador for NAASCA.org, and I am a survivor of child abuse. I have met so many men who are sexually abused, not only in their childhood, but as adult men. Many will not come forward due to shame, guilt, and other issues that prevent them from getting help. This show is so important. Thank you.
Oh,
so
thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. And also on Periscope, U4Sight saying it's a talked about, but it's quickly shunned by everybody, including girlfriends and family. And then also U4Sight on Facebook, YouTube Live saying men don't want to be looked at differently or pitied. Their strength is most important.
Absolutely. And I hear that. And with the men that I have worked with clinically, and it's research partners. I have numerous males who are research partners who have lived experience of sexual abuse and assault, and, conduct the research right along with me, aren't just the participants. But I think one of the things that I like to tell them and I like to emphasize is there's incredible strength in working through this pain, in acknowledging it to yourself that it had happened and not denying or minimizing its impact, and then working through it. And I think, one of the great things I've found in working with this population is how generous they are towards one another. So there've been some incredible nonprofits that I've worked with. One's called Male Survivor. I don't know if you know it. Another's called Men Healing. And there's lots of organizations. These are just two that I work closely with. And I think it's such a beautiful experience to see these survivors be forward and disclose their experiences and help one another to heal.
So how has the community changed from when you started on this journey?
The larger trauma community, or the male survivor community, or
the male survivor community, because and are they more open? Obviously, they're maybe a little bit more open to share than when you started on this journey, correct?
Right. Rather, than 20 years ago, for sure. And I think that's, one of the things I sort of talked to you about was there was a incredible series in the New York Times, I think it was like 3 weeks ago, and it was talking about sexual assault of men in the military. And I did not write that. It was excellent. And those men were so courageous for coming forward and sharing their stories and pictures and about their lives and about their healing. And all I simply did was write an op-ed saying, we need to be talking about this in a wider format, that it doesn't just happen in the military, it happens outside of the military. And it doesn't just happen in the church, it happens in the synagogue, it happens on the sports field, and it happens in people's homes. And we need to be talking about it and helping these men and their partners and their families heal, and healing is possible. So
many facets here I want to delve down deeper into here, that especially in the military, why is it, in your opinion, been, what's a better word, not talked about, hidden, kept behind closed doors? What are some of the factors why we're not hearing more about this, especially in the military?
Well, I think, and probably the audience can answer as well, from their own experiences and from their own thoughts about this. But I think one of the things is men and boys are, I don't want to say unfortunately, but are socialized to always be brave and strong and never cry. And I understand that. But I think if you fall down and you scrape your knee, you say, ouch, that hurts. And you clean it up and you get up and you move forward. So, you know, as I say to the veterans that I work with, and I say to myself and my children, fall down 7 times, get up 8, the famous Chinese proverb. Nonetheless, when you hurt yourself or when you have a deep wound, like childhood sexual abuse often is, then you need to acknowledge it and work through those complicated emotions. And I think trauma changes people often. It changes the way people think about themselves, the way they think about the world, and the way they think about other people. And that's there's no magic wand to just say, poof, that goes away. I think it's a deep healing process that takes time.
What are some of the factors or some of the reasons men are more willing to talk about it more now than 20 years ago?
I think there have been some key people who've come forward and talked about it. Tyler Perry just was on the cover of People magazine and talking about his horrific childhood physical abuse. And then he disclosed that by the age of maybe 12, he had been sexually violated by 4 different people that his family knew. So I think it takes the courage of some of those men and to come forward and say, hey, me too. And then I think it helps to normalize it for somebody else who either, you know, kept it at bay or minimized that experience in their life and felt tremendous shame about it. I think that's one big part of it.
Okay, and
I also think there's more organizations, Dr. Vibe, than there ever was. And so there's more support about that. One of the pieces that I wrote, I think it was like in 2015, 2016, I wrote it for CNN, and it was about the suicide of Chester Bennington. Did you ever hear his music? He was the lead singer of Linkin Park, and he had been amazing band, amazing frontman singer, and he had been very open about his history of depression and substance abuse and linking it to childhood sexual abuse. And so when I saw this, I was grieving, but I thought for his music and for the world, but I also thought this is a perfect opportunity to educate the public about sexual abuse of boys and men. And I did, and excuse me, and I had about 40 men who read this and sent me private, email messages and saying, I never talked about this to anyone. And of course, I responded to everyone and I sent them links to Male Survivor and Men Healing and et cetera. But I think, it's more of those things. It's more public discussions, letting them know there's nothing to be ashamed of.
Right. On a conversation topic like this one, I definitely would like to get your thoughts on the whole area of society, past and present, how much of a factor it's had on this topic, because the socialization piece is a huge factor here. And you mentioned earlier on about, boys don't cry, men don't cry. How's that changed and how's that affected this subject, in your opinion, over the years?
Yeah, I hope it's changing. It's not changing fast enough for me. I'd like it to change more. But, in working with veterans, both combat veterans, ones that were former prisoners of war, and men and women who've been sexually assaulted in the military, a lot of them talk about the pain of society not recognizing what they've been through. And I feel like as a trauma psychologist, my job in some ways has gotten a little bit easier since, I think the national consciousness on trauma is sort of changing with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, with 9/11 and being attacked, the U.S. being attacked, with Hurricane Katrina. I think more people are understanding the frequency of traumatic events and the impact. And I think that's changed. I hope it's changing. But of course, in terms of boys and men and sexual abuse, I don't think it's changing fast enough. But we're all in the good fight, right? We're helping to educate, hopefully.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In the research that you have done, have you heard commonalities in the stories? And if you have, could you share some of them with us?
Sure. I think there's a lot of commonalities in terms of the major mental health disorders they may meet criteria for, including post-traumatic stress disorder, substance abuse, addictions, and major depression, some anxiety. But in terms of themes, feeling like they're damaged, they're no good, that they're crazy, that something must be really wrong with them, that no one would ever love them or care for them if they knew what they had been experienced. I've also heard a lot of people talk, and this is across traumas, but in particular with interpersonal violence, that they feel they can't trust anyone, that there's nobody safe out there. There's nobody who's going to get their back. There's nobody they can turn to. And then, I think, sort of what happens with trauma is, and I say this to the people that I work with currently, it changes your lens, it darkens the lens that you wear, and you see the world as just a really unsafe place. And I'm never trying to convince people that there aren't unsavory people in the world and that there aren't unsafe situations. But I think, I would do a disservice to them if I bought into the trauma model that the world is a horrible place. I believe, although bad, horrible things happen, that the vast majority of us are good people, and it's a benevolent world. Otherwise, I couldn't do this work.
Right. And as you're sharing with us, it's just making me think about something. When a man applies to go into the military, do they do any psychological testing?
So they didn't years ago. I think now they're trying to do more sort of like, interviews to sort of who would be resilient. But I gotta say, I think combat and sexual assault takes the most resilient people and knocks them down. And if you think of the frequency of traumatic events, there's a lot of different types of traumatic events. At least 70% of the population, there have been not just US and Canadian surveys, but there have been large epi studies worldwide showing that at least 70% of people have experienced one traumatic event in their lifetime. And most of us don't go on to experience full-blown PTSD, or about 10% of the population probably experiences. A lot of us, though, probably meet sub-threshold partial PTSD or have other difficulties. But what packs the biggest punch in terms of trauma is the dose and the duration of the trauma. So all other things equal, and trauma's never equal, and I don't like comparing traumas, but all other things equal, if you experience a single car accident, no one dies, your life, there was no life threat. It was serious, but no serious life threat. The probability of you having post-traumatic stress disorder or any other subsequent mental health difficulty is fairly low. So it's possible, but it's not probable. But for something like combat, for something like interpersonal violence, for something that happens in childhood, which penetrates your physical and psychological boundaries, and it goes on for a prolonged period of time, so it's prolonged and severe, that packs a huge punch. So the probability of you having subsequent difficulties, emotional, relational, occupational, sexual, social, is quite large. And I think that gets lost sometimes, and that some trauma survivors say to themselves, I shouldn't have these symptoms. And I often think, heck, if I had been through what you've been through, I've no doubt I have symptoms too. That is normal. That's a normal reaction to some horrific experiences.
It just brings a picture up in my mind that, you have a man applying for service. He's been sexually abused.
Yes.
Should we not, as a community, be concerned about him being involved in combat? If the challenges of being sexually abused before he got into the service haven't been fully addressed or looked at?
I think a lot of us, have unresolved traumas and
Yeah.
can function. So somebody could have been sexually abused or assaulted pre-military and do just fine in combat, although that might make them more susceptible. I think also one of the fears that I've been told, one of the themes, is that some men are afraid to acknowledge or admit publicly to loved ones or that they've been sexually abused, because there's something called the vampire myth. And it's that, if you've been abused, you're going to abuse. And that's a crock of shit. It just doesn't, I shouldn't say that on your show, should I?
It's all right. You said it, and I said, man. So I love. We got the Yale professor getting real. So this is good. She's getting real. So now I know you're comfortable.
I have to have a drink of water on that note.
No problem. And just want to welcome Leah, the life coach, to the conversation. Welcome, Leah. Long time no chat. Hope you're doing fine. And again, people, if you're watching on the Get Vocal platform, there are some squares open. Lori, if you want to jump in, I would love you to come in. I would love you to come in. So yeah, keep on going. You were on a good roll right there. So hopefully you can just continue on for where you left off.
I have no idea what I was saying. I really don't like public speaking. You told me this is a conversation. So that's
okay.
What I'm
I remember.
I can't remember what I said 2 minutes ago.
I was talking about men who have been sexually abused.
Yes.
Before they enter in.
Oh, and am I concerned that they would what? Well, I'm not concerned that they would.
Well, I think like any trauma.
Yeah.
That can potentially not lead to optimum performance when it comes to battle.
I mean, I think none of us knows how we're going to. I've never been in the military. I've never been in battle, although I've worked with these men and women for so long. I sometimes refer to myself as, we. I just love them so much. I tell them all the time. I bring them donuts. I give them hugs. It's just. But I swear it's very appropriate. I only see them once a week, so it's different than being their individual therapist. I'm their group therapist.
So let me just interrupt there if you don't mind.
Yeah.
How do they get to seeing you?
So right now, I have done for years a lot of individual work, working with people one-on-one, but because of my research and because of my children, and I can't sort of do all the clinical work that I want to do. So I only run some groups a week. So I only see patients. I only see veterans that are in groups.
So this is what I mean. How are they referred to you? Like how do they get from I'm a veteran who has suffered from sexual abuse to I'm a veteran in a group that Joan is leading? How does that happen?
So right now, I mean, and believe me when I tell you, there's no magic here. I put on my pants one leg at a time. There's thousands of amazing VA mental health providers, psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists across the country. Not that we're a dime a dozen, but there's a lot of us. How they get to see me is the patients that I see now are hospitalized. They're all in a residential program for PTSD. So typically, and they're all veterans. So typically, they may be there because of suicidal ideation. They may be there because they've been court ordered for treatment. Some of them get into excessive fights and break the law. And then they'll go to a veteran court and the judge will say, you go to prison or you go to treatment. Or a family member will say, look, you're really struggling and I need you to go for help, or I want to leave our marriage, or I'm going to take the kids or whatever. So the ones I work with now are in a residential unit.
Okay.
So
all right.
They're
good.
it's pretty intense population. Wonderful population, but they're high intense symptoms.
Right. So Leah is saying, so glad she caught this. Vampire vampire myth being I won't repeat the word, I'll just say it's blank. So
Right.
people, you can just fill that in, whatever word you want to fill in, but it's not a nice word.
It's not true. It's not. I should have said it's not true.
There you go.
Myth. There's so many myths about male sexual abuse, right? That men should always want. If they get physiologically aroused, that means they wanted it. And those are all myths. The untruths. I won't call them crocs or anything. I'll be
okay. Well, we'll let Leah handle the crocs. We'll let Leah handle the crocs. And with these men, and it seems that the number is growing.
I don't know if it's growing so much. I hope it's not growing. I don't know if it's growing so much that people are now acknowledging it. That now we.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
That's it. That more are willing to acknowledge and at least begin to address it.
Yes, I think so. I hope so. That they're willing to more and more men are willing to address it and seek help. And that leads me to the new study that I'm conducting. How did I forget to tell you that? So, so my colleagues and I are working on a new federally funded study. It's based at Yale in Connecticut, but we're taking male survivor participants from the US and from Canada. Okay. And basically, and basically we're trying to sort of, some men aren't ready to come in for formal therapy, but they will talk to a peer. And so we've, with the help of these two nonprofits that I told you about earlier, Men Healing and Male Survivor, with their help, we identified 20 men with lived experience of sexual abuse and assault. None of them specialize in mental health issues. You have lawyer and physicist and graduate students. And so they range in age from like 25 to 65, and they're volunteering their time and they're working with us. They came to Yale, they received training. They're the most amazing men. I just feel so blessed. And they're going to be running these psychotherapy groups online, and the supervisors will be licensed clinical psychologists, but the front line is going to be these men with lived experience. So we're trying to help people heal.
Excellent. Do you ever get a chance to speak to any of these men's families or partners at all, or is it just you just have communication with themselves?
For this study, or in my clinical practice and in my years of work in general, or just for this study? Both. Okay, so for this study, it's only the male participants, and then the men who are partners with in the research and who are peer leaders who are delivering the interventions. So we don't have the contact with families, unfortunately. Maybe that's the next grant. But I certainly over the years have worked with or even just talked to family members. And I remember when I was at the San Jose VA, and I was specializing in working with the older veterans. So it was at that time the older vets, like now the older vets would be Vietnam guys, right? But at the time, it was the older vets were the World War II and the Korean War veterans. And I remember some of the family members saying to me, so many of them had suffered in silence for so long, because after they came back from the service, they were sort of, all told like, the war will go away. Just, they espouse that very like John Wayne kind of attitude, right? Just put the war behind you and move forward. And so here they were in their 70s and beyond, and were just starting to understand the impact of trauma, having a label for it, knowing they were not crazy. That was PTSD. And so after years of sort of working with them, family members would come up to my colleagues and I, and I'm sure this happens nationwide in the US and in Canada, where, veteran family members will come up and say, thank you for returning my husband to me, or returning my, my father's never told me he loved me before, and he did. And it wasn't that the man didn't love his children. It was that he couldn't access that emotion. I think one of the things that trauma does is it messes with your emotions, and you kind of like numb out sometimes. And the problem is that it can become a self-protective mechanism where you try to like wall yourself off from the pain. But not a lot of people can do that strategically, where they only wall themselves off from the bad stuff. They wind up numbing themselves off from the good stuff too. And so I have had access with family members in that regard, but not for this particular study.
Excellent. Lori is saying, amazing. Leah, the life coach. Leah's saying, I'm amazing. So happy to hear you guys talk about this. Well, she's bringing it. Dr. Jones bringing it. She's bringing it.
Well, I'm glad there, I think there need to be more places like this. And, maybe we could talk at other points in time. And, I don't know if you know from Men Healing, I don't know if you know Jim Struve, who runs it. He's an incredible social worker. And, maybe we could also talk to men who've experienced this and who have moved through the healing stages.
The mic is open.
Awesome. Okay.
The mic is, I'm not a one and done person. If they want to come on and you want to come on again, the mic is always open. I think it's a very important conversation. Let me ask, there's a lot of talk about masculinity these days.
Yes.
How has this impacted, in your opinion, in any way, what you're doing? If it has, in any way.
Again, I see strong men as being the ones who can acknowledge their pain and work through it. So, I say sometimes to the veterans that come into the program, and, we have this 3-month program, that they are the strong ones, because, people that don't come into the program that really could benefit from the program, who have there's a lot of practical barriers, right? People have childcare and they have jobs, but there's also stigmas, and there's, I don't want to talk to people about problems, and, real men shouldn't talk about their problems. We should be able to take it or suck it up, or whatever society has sort of taught us. But I think real strength and true masculinity comes from acknowledging those pains and working through them, not stuffing them down. That's fear-based. That's anxiety-based. And what happens, and what I say to people, is the more you push it down, the more it becomes, a garbage can, right? And then that's going to eat away at your heart. People with PTSD don't just report that they have more physical health problems. They actually are indeed physically sicker. And how sad is that? They have more cardiovascular problems. And I've got to say, this is sort of this new line of research. It's probably been going on for a decade, mainly in the military, in the veteran population, but starting to be outside the civilians, which is that, when you wear PTSD for so long, you could be at risk for accelerated aging and cognitive impairment. It can really have that kind of impact, not just on your body, but on your brain. And so I think it's a very brave, courageous, and wonderful thing that these men are coming forward and getting help, and therefore then having a reverberating impact for their families, for healthy families.
Lori is saying, yes, it takes great strength to face these traumas.
Yes, I agree. They're my heroes.
How does it make you feel when you see the transformation? Taking off your Yale face and just putting on your Joan face.
Yes.
How does it make you feel when you see that opening up, that transformation in front of your eyes?
Well, I love that. And I can still, I with or without the Yale face, as you can see, I'm quite animated, unfortunately. I'm not Italian, but I, So people know I get enthusiastic. I'll give you an example. A number of years ago, so it would have been a while back, was my first faculty job. I was at the University of Pennsylvania and the Philadelphia VA. And I used to run large psychotherapy groups. It was mainly Vietnam guys. We had some guys from the first Persian Gulf in there. And when I first started to work with them, you know, I was young at the time, or much younger at the time. And they would sort of, you know, they would see me as an authority figure, and they'd sort of buck up and say, I'm not going to listen to it. I'd say, listen. I'm just going to plant some seeds, and I'm going to water them over time. Try not to rake them out, you know. And we'd sort of joke and whatever. And so 4 years later, I left and moved to Connecticut and took a job in New York City. And my veterans handed me a dozen red roses, and they said, yeah. And they said, these are the seeds that you have planted, and look how they have grown. And do you know what I did, Dr. Vibe? I bawled like a baby. So they're my people. And I was so filled with pride and joy for them.
Well, Dr. Tachi says, how wonderful. Lori says, absolutely awesome.
Thanks. It takes a village. I'm sure there's so many of us doing this work. And I appreciate the work that you're doing, especially, you know,
Lori, yes. Can you come on, Lori? We've been waiting for you. Come on in, Lori. We've been waiting for you.
Yes.
No, we've been setting it up for you, Lori. You got to come in. Please come on, Lori. So that, and I'm sure it's moments like that that keep you going.
For sure. Yeah.
Are you beginning to see? Lori is here. Come on in, Lori. How you doing?
Hello. Hi, Dr. Vibe. Hi, Joan.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I'm outstanding. Nice I'm better because you're in. Please share with Dr. Joan, please.
Well, I just wanted to listen because I'm a survivor myself of multiple forms of child abuse, and so were my 6 siblings, brothers and sisters. But since I started my healing journey, have been volunteering with different groups like NASCA, National Adult, different groups, doing wonderful work. But I love what you're doing, Dr. Joan Cook. And I just wanted to say, it's people like you, when you were talking about planting a seed, you know, you not only planted a seed for, you know, and still continuing to plant a seed for the veterans in the military, you know, who've been sexually abused, but for everybody around you who sees the work that you're doing. Because it seeds out as well into the community. So it's not just, it's everywhere. So I love that, because it just reminded me of something that happened in my own past, in my childhood, where these people had said something to me that, you know, a few times that, you know, they'd talk to me and they put a seed in my heart of love, you know, and it didn't really manifest until many years later. And this is my cat. That's my cat, little Lori. And she always wants to be in the video. She's so funny. But it didn't seem, you know, I mean, I was glad they spoke these words to me, but it was years later when I was just about ready to end it all, after so many years of suicidal ideation and whatnot, that I remembered these words that these people had told me. And it really was a spark, like a spark to say, you can get help, you know, you can change this. You don't have to continue spiraling downward in this depression. So abuse is abuse. I mean, we all, you know, different situations, different scenarios, you know, men, women, but abuse hurts, you know, and the survivors that are left to have to deal with this, it's very, very hard to come forward and get help. So I love what you're doing, and I just wanted to say thank you very much. I'm glad there's people like you out there doing this, you know.
Thank you. And I'm glad there's courageous people out there like you. So thank you.
Well, and you know, and Dr. Vibe for having this show.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
Yeah,
so thank you, Dr. Vibe.
I just show up. That's the, you know, you all of you create the magic. I just show up. That's fantastic.
That's awesome.
That is really, really good. Lori, you say that you volunteer with this. What are your experiences encountering men who have been sexually abused, if you have had any?
Yeah, this is, I mean, the CEO and founder of NASCA, National Association of Adult Survivors of Child Abuse. I'm tired tonight, sorry. it was founded by a gentleman who was a victim of sex trafficking as a youth. So he was, you know, he's a survivor of sexual abuse, even, you know, right up until he was about 17, 18 years old. He was trafficked until he got away, got out. So he started the organization, and it's over the years, it's just, you know, it's all volunteer, and, you know, we just try to help get the word out, you know, get help support survivors.
Lori,
I've just read
so thank you for sharing that. Do you know that gentleman at all?
Actually, I've been a friend. Well, we haven't met because he's in California, and between California and Florida, he travels back and forth. He's pretty busy. I'm in Canada, and so I haven't personally. Yeah, I'm up here in Calgary, Alberta.
So wonderful city of Calgary. Lori, I'm going to ask you a favor. I've just typed in my email address in the comment section. Can you reach out to me and we can chat offline, because I'm going to make an effort to see if I can get the head of the organization that you've mentioned on.
For sure. I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I that's the way I'd love to get him on to chat about this.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful, because if you didn't come on the conversation, I would have had no idea about that organization. No, I'm being serious. Nice. So awesome. I thank you for coming on and adding positive value and bringing that to my attention, because I will do my best to reach out to that organization to have them come on here and share.
I'm sure that he'd be very honored. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure that he would love to. And he's speaking. So, yeah, I'll be sure to do that. Thank you very much.
No problem. I'm going to let you go, but you get my email address. It's there in the comments section. Email me. And
you bet.
Can you do it if you can do it within the next 24 hours, I would really appreciate it.
I'll do it by the end of tonight. Thank you so much.
I'm going to let you go.
Wonderful show.
No problem. And we'll start winding down the conversation. Thank you. Bye-bye. Dr. Cook, you see what you caused? You caused an avalanche.
You caused, because you let me come on and chat. So thank you for making for elevating my voice on this issue and for allowing me to have this conversation. And it wasn't too painful, although I hate public speaking. It's just a conversation.
You're just sharing, Dr. Joan. You're just sharing. That's all you're doing.
I prefer to write.
I know, but
my clients, but not really.
You gotta broaden it out. You know. I also want to say hello on the Get Vocal platform. Hello to Shannon. Hello to Ms. Danny. Thank you so much for sharing. Also, you Foresight on the YouTube platform he's saying, I think television could help showing programs about this subject, and men seeing other men get help and feel better afterwards would go a long way. He also says men will often cocoon themselves and close themselves off from other people to try to solve the problem themselves. And whatever they end up being after they come out is who they are. Wow. Very true.
You know, I think that movie, it won an Academy Award. I think it was in 2015, Spotlight, about the childhood sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. It was in Boston, and the Boston Globe, the Spotlight team, the investigator. I think that also helped put it on this sort of consciousness. You know, for people to see that it wasn't just Boston, it was all over, and it wasn't just the church. It happens everywhere.
Yes. So this I'm just trying to. Yes. So I'm actually going to put a Wikipedia link to the movie Spotlight that you just mentioned in the comments section here. So if people want to delve a little bit deeper into this conversation or this subject, I'm going to put the link here in the comments section. Right here. So that's the wiki leak for the Spotlight film. One thing you also said, Dr. Joan, that was very important. You said like more men need to be addressing this subject. I also I help fathers on a consistent basis. And unfortunately, well, fortunately, I'm helping them. Unfortunately, it's the fathers that are at the margins that I'm helping right now. But I think there are fathers that are not as much on the margins that also need that psychological help development. One of the things I say on a regular basis, that there are a lot of men that are screaming and nothing's coming out. And it's wonderful the work you're doing with men that they're screaming, but they're letting it come out.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like you
and
said earlier on about the garbage.
Working through it.
Yeah, because you said earlier about the garbage analogy about pressing down, but they are leveling it up and letting it out.
Yeah. And not, I mean, to do it in a sort of a measured and a taper way, right? Because what gets them into trouble is when they explode, when they get into fights with family members, when they get into fights at bars or etc. But, in therapy with peers, slowly examining the pieces, working through it, discarding things you can, and working through the rest of it. You know what? Would you be willing to put our study website on your page?
Yes, I can do that.
That'd be good.
Right now. And I put it on the post promoting this conversation, but I can do it right now in the comment section. This is another conversation. So when you are doing these, for lack of a word, these sessions or consultations with the veterans, is it just you alone?
My clinical work now, it's just me and the veterans in a group. But a lot of times in the VA, depending on how big, and outside the VA too, depending on how big, there's usually one or two therapists. But
I just wonder, and as Dr. Joan has asked, I've put the link for her research study in the comments section, and also be part of when I post this on my own page, the Dr. Vibe Show page. The links will be there too.
Okay.
Do you ever think if they would be as open to you if you were a male instead of a female? Does that have any difference? Like if a man had the same training as you and they were in, would it be, do you think it'd be any different?
I think it could be different by gender, but I think it's more. I think it's more about openness and willingness to hear, right? And it's more about, and it's more about validation. Because I've certainly had senior male therapists that I've learned from who've been incredible therapists to men and boys. So maybe initially, if the perpetrator had been a male, then it might be hard. But also, one thing we didn't talk about, and I'm not sure if I'm the best person to talk about it, but it could be talked about, is that not all of the boys and men are perpetrated against by men. Women.
There you go. Yes, there you go.
A range of violence. And so, it could work the same way, is that men might feel uncomfortable seeing me because, they've been perpetrated against. I guess I don't experience that as much anymore, maybe in part because they can see my big heart and they're open and willing to learn, but I can certainly see how that might happen.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we'll start winding it down here because you've been fantastic.
Thanks. It's just a conversation.
There you go. There you go. Are there any final words you'd like to share with our audience?
That if you know someone and you love someone that this has happened to, please let them know that they are not alone. There's nothing they did to bring this abuse on, and that healing is possible, and they can work through their pain and live very meaningful, happy lives.
Wonderful. If people want to find out more information, I already put about your study, but any other places that they can find out more about you and the work you're doing?
I have a Yale faculty page. It's a little boring, but I need a personal web page, but I'm not so tech savvy like you are, so I don't really. So I sometimes publish my op-eds there. I published one today in the Hill about Mental Health Day, and that California is the first state, I don't know if you know this, this week they started a toll-free what's called like peer-led warm line. So for non-crisis events, you can call this and get support and referrals. It's amazing. So I wrote about that.
So even though Dr. Joan isn't happy with it, I did put the link to her website on the Get Vocal page.
I gotta update it. I have to update
it. Okay, at least you have one. So that's the most important thing.
I'm trying.
It's, I'll say this here, actually at the center that I run, Helping Fathers, actually in the new year, we're actually going to be starting a course for fathers who have abused members of their family.
Interesting.
So it's a little bit of a different thing, and it's a 17-week course.
And do you know, I have a friend at Yale who does that as well. So I should put you in contact with her. Her name's Carla Stover. She's amazing. You would like her a ton.
Sure, and hopefully, like I'm going to be hosting it. There's 2 facilitators that I actually am going to start reading the course content. I'll be very interested to know if there's a point where they'll be asking the fathers if they've ever been sexually abused,
or abused more broadly, or mistreated.
Exactly.
And yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of trauma can be, intergenerational.
Yes,
sadly.
But I have a feeling that you've probably come across some of those examples during your journey.
Yeah. So I'll say to you what I heard Janet Reno say to my trauma colleagues, which is thank you for doing the work of angels.
Oh, I'm humbled. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
On that, I now have wings. So we're going to fly away from the live conversation. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who watches this or listens to this live on the replay. Thank you to Lori. Thank you to Dr. Tachi. Thank you to Danny, Big Bad Brad. Thank you to Shannon. Thank you so much, as always, you for sight. I'd like to thank you also. And just if you see someone hurting, help. So that's it. That's the thing. As always, it's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2018 award winner of innovation given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. As always, I like to say when I close off my conversations, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger, block assumptions, and then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. God bless, peace be well, keep the faith, and walk good, and follow me because more epic conversations coming up. Good night, everybody, and be well and keep the faith.
Good night.